Welcome to the Canadian Beef Cattle Podcast, presented by the Beef Cattle Research Council. The most popular content from beefresearch.ca, available on the go. Before we get into this week's episode, a quick message from the BCRC.
Knowing where you are helps you plan where you want to go with your beef herd, whether your goals include heavier weaning weights, a more uniform coat color, or other traits. Genetic change happens through sire and replacement selection alongside culling. Some goals are shaped by genetics and others by environment and management. The Beef Cattle Research Council's 7-part online course will guide you in tracking genetic improvements through practical record keeping, helping you turn herd data into informed decisions. Find the link to the Tracking Genetic Improvements course in the show notes. This episode is titled, Until the Cows Come Home: 5 Strategies to Stop Sickness Before It Starts This Fall. Biosecurity hazards on beef operations are sometimes overlooked. However, the risk of introducing disease onto your farm is real and relatively common. It can be especially prevalent in the fall when cattle return from various community pastures, grazing leases, or even pastures that border neighbouring livestock. Other common fall practices such as borrowing stock trailers or outsourcing transport, sharing chutes, or buying and replacement breeding stock can bring more risk than what producers bargain for. Fortunately, there are some practices that producers can implement to help manage their biosecurity risks. Producers first have to accept and be aware of biosecurity risks that exist. No animal industry can claim to be a closed industry, explains Dr. Blake Baylog. Baylog, who practices veterinary medicine out of the Bow Valley Veterinary Clinic at Brooks, Alberta, says visiting farms and auction marts, hosting tours, attending livestock and 4-H shows, borrowing livestock equipment, and even visiting your vet clinic can be risky endeavors. Daniel Pekoski, DVM with Metzger Veterinary Services, out of Linwood, Ontario, says bringing replacement stock on farm is a common risk producers must address. I think a lot of times replacement cattle coming in get overlooked, or on the side of the bull, the potential to bring in disease with new arrivals, Pekoski explains. A great place to start developing a biosecurity plan is with your veterinarian. Through an established veterinary client-patient relationship, you can work to identify risks and mitigate hazards. Having a comprehensive on-farm vaccination protocol is essential to mitigating any potential viruses, diseases, and pest problems that a herd is exposed to. In addition to effective herd vaccination, there are a few specific practices producers implement. Practice number 1, manage cattle that go into and come out of a community pasture strategically. Baylog says producers should take a proactive stance in community grazing situations. Be a leader in preventative measures, he says. Don't send those troubled critters so you aren't the person helping spread, Baylog adds. For example, animals in poor body condition score should not be shipped to a community pasture. Tagging and managing as separate cohorts can be a good management tool, says Baylog, both before and after the grazing season. After cattle return, ideally, they will be kept separate from the main herd until preg checking. It really depends what bug we're talking about, but often we are going to see something within a 3 to 4 week time frame, he says. If producers do end up bringing home cows carrying a disease that causes fetal loss, such as BVD or IRB, having them apart from the main herd limits that spread. That 3 to 4 week window pays dividends in terms of disease prevention. Baylog suggests pasture staff should have a standardized protocol for vaccination, disease identification, and treatment. And they should work closely with a veterinarian when things aren't looking right. Pekoski adds that community pastures and commingled grazing require everyone to get on board. It takes a concerted effort on behalf of all parties involved to come up with a protocol to reduce the risk of mixed cattle exposed to other disease, he explains. Practice number 2. Isolate new arrivals and test target animals. Quarantine new arrivals in a separate pen or field or paddock for 3 weeks, recommends Pekoski, in order to monitor for signs of transmissible diseases and things like visible dermatitis, lameness, and ringworm. Isolated new entrants should not have access to common watering points or nose-to-nose contact with other cattle from the main herd. When purchasing breeding stock, ask about vaccination status and any historical health issues such as foot rot, pink eye, pneumonia, or scours that the sellers may have had. Sometimes animals may appear healthy, but there are some pathogens that carry over in mucosa and flare up in the year later on, says Baylog. Pekoski says buyers or sellers should consider testing cattle prior to any transactions. BVD, IBR, reproductive diseases like leptospirosis, Johne's disease. Those are some of the diseases that we can scan for. Dr. Baylog agrees there are cost-effective testing options for many transmissible diseases, particularly BVD. He adds that producers can request a fecal panel test for internal parasites, depending on the time of year, and also suggests testing bulls for trichomoniasis and Vibrio. Testing can also be used as a marketing tool. Doing and showing the steps we are taking, maybe it's routine disease testing, that can get us to another level of disease-free status and marketing opportunities, Dr. Baylog adds. Baylog says producers should also have a biocontainment plan to isolate sick cattle from within their existing herd. A lot of the bugs that we think about, things like pneumonia and scours, are already there on your operation. How do you reduce that exposure, he asks. For example, Baylog says producers should avoid bringing home a sick cow and putting her in with replacement heifers. Now you're exposing the sick animal to your naive animals. Create true biocontainment and have a sick pen and keep them away from other animals. Practice number 4, keep it clean. Cleaning and disinfecting commonly used fall equipment such as portable scales, chutes, or transport trailers between farms is key. Pekoski says using farm-specific clothing and ensuring boots are cleaned and disinfected between subsequent farms can also go a long way to preventing the spread of disease. For other equipment like bottles and tubes, wash with soap and warm water, he says. Change needles frequently, clean syringes, and make sure they are nice and dry between uses, he adds, so that subsequent usage for vaccination or treatment is safe and effective. Even sharing equipment within operations on different critters is a risk, warns Dr. Baylog. For example, administering oral meloxicam to a scouring calf, then using the same contaminated tube on calves in a branding pen can result in the spread of disease. With things like drenchers, tubes, bottles, you want to work clean to dirty, from the lowest risk to highest risk animals, Baylog explains. Have a separate tube for scouring calves and a separate one for newborns. Practice number 4, take care if you share. Pekoski says it's best if producers avoid sharing items between farms. However, if it is going to happen, it should be well thought out. There should be a conversation between producers about vaccine protocols in one herd versus the other, he advises. Discuss the level of risk and protection between farms sharing equipment like chutes or animals such as bulls, he says. Good communication can help reduce risks. If a problem arises, you at least have an idea of what you are dealing with as far as vaccine status and parasite status, and what you may be exposing your herd to, Pekoski adds. Practice number 5, know the flow. On a broader scale, it's valuable to assess the animal flow on your farm. How is your operation laid out? What kind of interactions do you have that might be risky? Where does dead stock go? Where are your pastures, and do they border someone with a lower biosecurity? Questions Dr. Baylog. Baylog suggests taking a Google map of your farm facility to look at drainage, assess potential risks, and consider making changes for pens for different groups or age categories of animals to reduce exposure to effluent or other disease reservoirs. Look at animal movement through calving season and throughout the year. Pekoski says that getting back to the basics of making sure yards are clean and producers have adequate bedding will help manage disease during high-risk times such as calving or bringing new animals in. Whether you have a small-sized farm or a larger operation, biosecurity matters. The risk of bringing something onto your farm or transmitting a disease to another farm can financially have an impact, as well as a welfare impact, says Dr. Pekoski. Effective biosecurity also has a global influence. The threat of foreign animal diseases can have an impact on our beef herds and beef industry and impact trade, Baylog says. Canada's stringent animal health, food safety, and biosecurity standards can instill confidence in our beef sector throughout the value chain. There is also a human health benefit to practicing biosecurity measures when it comes to the issue of zoonotic diseases, which are transmissible from animals to people. Zoonotic diseases are real and exist on our operations. Some are scarier than others, and some we don't know if there is a link, Dr. Baylog says. Baylog says reducing biosecurity risks and planning ahead can take just a few extra minutes each day and often doesn't have to cost a lot. It comes down to a few simple things done right every day.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode. You can find all relevant links and information at beefresearch.ca or in the show notes. The Beef Cattle Research Council is funded by the Canadian Beef Cattle Checkoff and strives for excellence in the production of Canadian beef, cattle, and forage through research, innovation, and extension. Tune in every Tuesday as the Canadian Beef Cattle Podcast delivers straightforward insights, expert information, and a wealth of practical knowledge for Canadian beef producers. Subscribe now.